The cardboard box in Daniel Carter's hands was getting heavier with every step, even though there was almost nothing inside it except a coffee mug, a framed photo, and a stack of folded papers that meant his job was gone. A cold wind swept down the street, pushing dust along the pavement as the sun slowly slid behind the buildings, and Daniel kept walking because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the moment his boss said the words, "Security will escort you out." 20 years of loyalty erased in 10 seconds. Daniel Carter, a single father, a quiet man who never asked for much, had just been fired from the small medical supply warehouse where he worked double shifts to raise his daughter. He walked slowly down Maple Avenue toward the small apartment he shared with 8-year-old Lily, trying to figure out how he would explain to her that things were about to get harder. Lily believed her dad could fix anything: broken toys, scraped knees, math homework, nightmares about monsters, but Daniel wasn't sure he could fix this. The rent was due in 10 days. His savings barely covered groceries, and the world suddenly felt much larger and colder than it had that morning. He adjusted the worn strap of his bag and kept moving past quiet houses and empty sidewalks until the sound of thunder rolled across the sky, except the sky was perfectly clear. Daniel stopped walking. The sound grew louder, a deep rhythmic pounding that vibrated in his chest. Then he looked up. 3 black helicopters roared across the sky, flying low and fast, their blades cutting through the afternoon air like giant spinning knives. People came out of nearby stores and homes, pointing upward in confusion. The helicopters circled once, then descended sharply toward the empty field beside Maple Avenue, kicking up clouds of dust and grass as they landed. Daniel stepped back, shielding his eyes. Within seconds, the doors burst open and men in dark tactical gear jumped out, running toward the street with urgency that sent a ripple of tension through the small crowd forming nearby. One of the men shouted into a radio while another scanned the people standing there. Then suddenly a voice rang out, loud and desperate, "Where's the doctor?" Everyone froze. A second soldier shouted even louder, "Where's the doctor? We were told he's here." The crowd looked around, confused, whispering among themselves, "A doctor here?" This was a quiet neighborhood, not a hospital. The soldiers moved quickly through the gathering people, their eyes searching faces with increasing frustration. Then one of them noticed Daniel standing near the sidewalk holding his box. "You there?" the soldier called, rushing toward him. Daniel blinked in surprise. "Me, yes, you," the man said urgently, grabbing Daniel's arm. "Are you Dr. Carter?" For a moment Daniel didn't respond because he hadn't heard that title in years. Dr. Carter, it sounded like a name from another life. "I used to be," Daniel said quietly. The soldier's expression changed instantly from tension to relief. "Thank God we found you." Before Daniel could ask what was happening, 2 medics rushed past, carrying a stretcher from the helicopter. On it lay a man, pale and motionless, with medical equipment strapped around him. Another officer spoke rapidly. "The president of Helix Medical collapsed during a private flight. We were told the only specialist within range who could stabilize him before the hospital is Dr. Daniel Carter, former trauma surgeon." Daniel's heart skipped. Former, that word had followed him for years. 7 years earlier, Daniel Carter had been one of the most respected trauma surgeons in the state, known for performing impossible emergency surgeries that saved lives others had already given up on. But everything changed the night his wife Emma died in a car accident. Daniel had been in the operating room saving a stranger while the doctors in another hospital tried and failed to save her. The guilt had hollowed him out. He resigned weeks later, unable to step into an operating room without hearing the echo of the words, "She didn't make it." Since then he had lived quietly, raising Lily, working warehouse shifts, and burying the past until now. The soldier spoke again, breaking the silence. "Sir, he's crashing. We don't have time." Daniel looked at the man on the stretcher, then at the helicopter, then back down at the cardboard box in his hands. Just an hour ago he had been a warehouse worker walking home unemployed. Now strangers were asking him to return to the life he had abandoned. His hands trembled slightly. "I'm not practicing anymore," Daniel said. The medic shook his head urgently. "You're the only trauma surgeon within 20 miles who knows the experimental cardiac clamp procedure. We confirmed it before landing. If we don't stabilize him now, he won't survive the flight to the hospital." Daniel felt something twist inside his chest. A memory surfaced. Emma smiling at him on the night he graduated medical school. "You didn't become a doctor to run away from saving people." He closed his eyes for a second, then slowly placed the cardboard box on the ground. "What equipment do you have?" he asked. The medics immediately opened a portable surgical kit inside the helicopter. "Not much, but enough for emergency stabilization." Daniel stepped forward, instinct taking over. Years might have passed, but his mind snapped back into focus like a machine restarting. "Move the stretcher onto the grass. I need space," he said firmly. The soldiers cleared the area as Daniel rolled up his sleeves. People in the neighborhood watched in stunned silence as the former warehouse worker suddenly moved with the calm authority of someone used to making life and death decisions. He examined the unconscious man quickly, pulse weak, skin pale, breathing shallow. Massive internal bleeding, likely cardiac rupture, Daniel muttered. One medic handed him gloves, another held the medical light. Daniel inhaled slowly, centering himself. For the first time in years he felt the familiar stillness of the operating room settle around him. Even though he stood in the middle of a windy field, everything else faded away. Fear, doubt, regret, all that mattered was the life in front of him. Scalpel, he said. The procedure was risky, even in a hospital here on the grass with limited equipment. It bordered on impossible, but Daniel worked with steady precision, guiding the medic step by step. Minutes passed like hours. The helicopter blades ticked softly as they cooled. The small crowd stood silent, barely breathing. Then suddenly the monitor beeped louder. The medic looked up in disbelief, his pulses stabilizing. Daniel finished the final step, securing the clamp, and slowly stepped back. The man on the stretcher was breathing stronger now, color returning faintly to his face. For a long moment no one spoke, then the lead officer exhaled deeply. "You just saved his life, Dr. Carter." Daniel removed his gloves, staring at his hands he thought he would never use again. The officer continued, "That man is Richard Halstead, founder of Helix Medical, the largest trauma research company in the country." Daniel nodded slightly, though the name meant little to him. The medics carefully loaded Halstead back into the helicopter. Before they closed the door, another helicopter touched down beside them. A woman in a business suit jumped out, running toward Daniel. She stopped when she saw him. "You're Dr. Carter," she said breathlessly. "Yes," her eyes filled with gratitude. "I'm Halstead's daughter. You saved my father's life today." Daniel looked down modestly. "I just did my job." She shook her head. "No, you reminded the world who you are." Then she handed him a small card. "My father built his company to advance trauma medicine, but he's been searching for years for someone capable of leading our emergency surgical research program, someone who understands both skill and compassion." She paused, looking directly at him. "He would want to meet the man who saved him." Daniel stared at the card quietly. The helicopters began lifting off one by one, their engines roaring back to life. Dust swirled around him again. A few minutes later the sky was empty and the field was quiet. The crowd slowly dispersed, still whispering in amazement. Daniel stood alone, looking at the place where the helicopters had been. Then he picked up his cardboard box from the sidewalk. Inside it, the framed photo of Lily smiled up at him. That evening he opened the apartment door and Lily ran toward him. "Daddy, you're home," she said, hugging him tightly. Daniel knelt and hugged her back, holding her longer than usual. "Guess what?" Lily said excitedly. "My teacher said heroes are people who help others even when they're scared." Daniel smiled softly, brushing her hair. "Your teacher is very wise. Are you scared of anything, Daddy?" she asked. Daniel thought about the helicopters, the field, the moment he picked up the scalpel again. Then he shook his head gently. "Sometimes we all are," he said, "but the important thing is remembering who we really are when it matters most." Weeks later the phone rang in Daniel's apartment. On the other end was Richard Halstead himself, alive, recovering, and grateful. And with that call came an offer that would change Daniel and Lily's lives forever. Not just a job, but a chance to lead a national trauma rescue program that would bring emergency surgical teams to places where hospitals were too far away. A chance to save lives in the moments that mattered most. Daniel looked at Lily drawing pictures on the living room floor. Then he looked at his hands again, the same hands that had once given up, and quietly he realized something powerful. Sometimes life closes one door not to punish you but to push you back toward the purpose you were meant to follow all along. Because even when the world thinks you've fallen, the moment you choose to stand again, you might just hear helicopters landing in the distance, asking for the hero you forgot you were.